welcome back. This is the poet Izzy Human with the philosopher Dunamis on this week's episode number 57, Fight for Principles. Please be sure to hit that like button on your way in, and if you like us, consider subscribing to keep up with our episodes on YouTube and give us a follow on X.
And Fightcast is here to empower individuals to live healthier, master their finances, pursue dreams, and inspire others through self-awareness and global impact. This is for entertainment and educational purposes only, and not financial advice. Hey, Izzy Human, how you doing this week?
It's been an enlightening week. I think that, as usual, the episodes are always on point with what's going on around us, what's going on with us. So, musically's been good. Collaboration projects are on the way. Shout out to the team as usual. And the sun actually just beamed for this podcast here. There's clouds, and then right there in the middle. So I think that we've got the podcast gods looking at us right now, and they're letting us know that we're in a safe place.
That's awesome.
Yeah. What about yourself?
I just started a new job, which is really pretty good. I think something that I needed to get lined up actually has quite a lot to do with what we're talking about this week with principles, just in that there's a lot of ways that people can make money. And because of certain things that I believe, there's certain things that I just won't do to make money. But delivering pizzas is a fine, if temporary, if nothing else, situation to bring some money in, to pay down some bills, and establish things for ultimately what the purpose is. But there's shortcuts people take sometimes to bring money in, or to do things to make things easier for themselves. It just is a quick thought. There's the moral question of whether it's right for, let's say, a mother to steal to feed her starving children, right?
Mm.
It's one of those gray areas where people always bring that up sort of as an example of maybe a time when people might feel like it's appropriate to steal. And I think this week we're talking about lines that you don't cross. And so for me personally, that's one of those ones. I'm not going to steal, and I'm not going to sell drugs. I'm not going to go and prostitute or things like that for money. So that leaves, getting a job or making something and selling it, or there's definitely different ways to make money. But I think that it's been on my mind a lot lately, I think, because, and I'll just go ahead and crack this open, because I don't know how you feel about this yet, Izzy. And I've been thinking a lot about how the United States and the dollar were not necessarily doing all that great on the world stage right now. And, it was put in front of us in terms of drug smuggling. We were told that these boats from Venezuela are bringing dangerous narcotics into this country. And so we started by taking out some of those boats, and now we've taken their president. And I know that the very first thing that came up was we've taken some oil tankers from them. I think we've even gotten into a skirmish with Russian oil tankers, their shadow fleet, as much as I've heard. And Trump's talked about sending, American companies in there to pump oil and produce for, and I do understand the history a little bit, that those Venezuelan companies, there was a lot of American infrastructure that was put in Venezuela early on. And there were companies from the United States that invested, and I'm sure the United States feels like that was lost, or stolen. And so what do you think about all this, about us sort of temporarily at least, or maybe in some ways taking over Venezuela in order to, and whether it's about oil or drugs or what really is going on here. So I guess I kind of open the question up to you, Izzy, and see how you feel about all this.
Well, that's the thing. What's the why? That's what we don't know. And there's a narrative always that's going to be on surface for us to run with, and then the next couple weeks it'll be this one. And really, the only people that know what the why is going to be the politics, the government, and all of that. Now, I have heard a lot of what you're speaking of, and you and Shaggy are my like teacher, what's my lesson when it comes to global politics and so on and so forth. So I really get a lot of my, I guess, want to know a little bit more. So as far as the oil goes, I mean, at this point, I'll be honest with you, man. I'm not surprised by anything. I'm not surprised by anything. I'm not surprised that there's drugs involved. I'm not surprised that the leverage is the oil because now there's this case that it stands or it at least buys time for this guy to be prosecuted or whatever on all of these crimes or whatever. And who knows, it might be like a 5 7 year 10 long process, right? And still, United States is there, and I don't know, all of the logistics of what's happening next in that regard, but just in the sense of how long this is going to be dragged out, because this is a big thing, right? But that just gives us more time to be there, right? And know the infrastructure more. So I'm not surprised one way or the other, and I feel like the drugs are coming from everywhere, and I think that there might be more. There might be places that are predominantly producing that, and I couldn't tell you where those things are at right off the rip. But yeah, what's the why? What is the
Yeah.
why? And because here's the thing. My question is, why did they really shoot JFK? Right? What's the why behind that? Because, but really though, like, and I know that seems to be like, why did they really kill, Martin Luther King? Why did they really kill some of these bigger figures, when they were speaking certain truths that were triggering? So I know that that's a little far fetched and a bit outlandish to say that, just because this seems to be, again, this is just a classic case of bullying. This is bullying to some degree. Who's bullying who and who bullied who first? Like, what's the history? What's the history? And I think this would also be a good one too, because I've also, looking at global economy a little bit more, I look at the passageways now, the waterways and access to things. What are the access points over there in Venezuela that are also of interest of the U.S. What needs to be occupied? What needs their eye on things? So I mean, you know how that goes. It's that big brother mentality of, we got to see everything. We don't want to. It could be security, and the security. They don't want to get attacked on a Venezuelan front, so they want to make sure that they got some manpower over there to avoid a blah blah blah. Whatever the reasoning is, but the list continues. It's like working on a car, and a brand new car that needs a new module, and you got to go through 300, 500 to 1,000 different wires and go through these different communication scanners, to try to read our government. Because they have done such a good job with building these layers of this lasagna over centuries.
Yeah. I think that what happens next is going to be really kind of key and important to see what direction things are going, just because, like you mentioned, we don't know where all the drugs are coming from. From my understanding, South America is where cocaine and drugs like that come from. And the biggest concern from what I understood was fentanyl. And there's word now that the United States may start to interact with the cartels in Mexico over land, and we might see incursions into Mexico or ground operations in Mexico.
Mm.
And just even hearing that as a possibility. And then we have, I think, the Danish prime minister here saying something recently about, NATO is not going to survive if Trump invades Greenland. and it
I
just
heard. Yeah.
all of this sounds so different than what we heard during the election season. You know, when Trump was talking about ending wars, not
Oh,
wanting to be involved in wars, all of that
being a,
stuff.
yeah, being a peacemaker, and it, man, it goes. It's like this between this love and war stuff, and I'm gonna be very fine line with the esotericism because I want to be practical, and just how I'm speaking with this because this isn't, for me, it's not like a long-winded response necessarily, but just logistics. And I just think like between love and war and what that means, though, because what does it mean for there to be peace? And just as well as I do, there will never be that kind of peace. Unfortunately, that's the inevitable that we work with. But just being able to communicate with each other, and what does that take? And the type of communication that has been infiltrated, saturated, again, like, are we that scared of the cartel to just be like, you can't go over there and do that? Or again, what's the why? Where are the receipts? Like, what is this? We've been following these guys, and that's what I don't really understand too, man. It's like, especially with all of these like undercover agents, right? We follow these guys for like 35, 40 something years, right? And they go through this whole operation. What is the one thing that you need in that case to really bust that guy? How long do you have to follow him? How many more people have to die, overdose, become addicted to this stuff? you know and then it's like, okay, is there this hesitation because there's actually, the shady stuff that actually goes on, and the government actually controls the drugs too? I mean, I'm not I wouldn't shy away and think that there's not some type of profitable margin involved with that. So
It
it's there's
it at
just
least there's definitely been, whether it's all facilitated or allowed by the federal government would probably be a stretch, but I definitely, there are clandestine operations by the CIA going way back. I mean, they've helped to smuggle drugs into this country, so it's
mafia. Yeah, mafias have run polices and things like that. I mean, that stuff is known. That's These Hollywood movies don't over exaggerate all this stuff, right? That's all I'm
exactly
saying. That's all I'm saying.
exactly, and so I get caught in between in these weird places because I'm a patriot. I grew up a patriotic person. I love the United States of America. I always have.
Hmm.
I love the people. I think I even said this and maybe even in our last episode. And the history of the United States isn't perfect. We're not a perfect country by any stretch of the imagination. It's just unsettling for me, and I feel like this has been one of those things that probably gets drawn along party lines, and I've never really found myself on the same side of as Democrats most of the time. But
Hmm.
I get really concerned and worried when I see us not just playing, the world's policeman, which I've heard that term thrown around too much, I think, in my
Yeah.
lifetime. But it's not just we're not just policing the waterways for pirates and making sure that country A gets to send its oil over to country B. I mean, when you're going and taking out the leader of another country, even if they are communistic or socialistic or whatever istic you don't agree with, I feel like what is it that gives the United States the right to do that?
Mm.
And again, whether we're taking out someone who's good or taking out someone who's bad, I'm not arguing that point. Maduro sounds like he was a pretty nasty guy.
Hmm.
I mean, we went and did the same thing to Saddam Hussein, right? A lot of Americans died doing that, and I just I don't know. I mean, the deed is done, and so it's not like we were consulted. It's not like we get a say in it. This is just us being able to, after the fact, and me just saying, I really hope that this doesn't turn into something uglier. I hope this somehow resolves itself in a somewhat peaceful way. But history doesn't usually play things out that way. In history, you have things like this that escalate, normally.
Yeah.
I don't know that Venezuela is going to be able to escalate a whole lot against the United States. So, I mean, really, I don't know what's going to happen here, but I just, it makes me feel wrong. It makes me feel like this whole thing could have been handled differently, but I don't know. Again, I'm like you said. I mean, I'm not there in the Oval Office with the president, getting to hear the things that he's hearing. So I don't understand the why either. That's the thing for me. But it really made me think this week from a principled point of view, and this is where this episode comes from. Is like, I think principally, if you are the leader of a country, you should be concerned with what's going on in that country, not concerning yourself with the leaders of other countries, removing the leaders of other countries, and making deals for oil, or taking over countries for oil, or whatever that is. I mean, there have been zero arrests of Epstein clients. We're supposed to have the Epstein files released. That hasn't happened. And it just the whole thing is very frustrating when you know that there's all these people in this country that can be and should be arrested, and they're just fine. But we have the time to go and arrest leaders of other countries and bring them back here to put them on trial. It's I might this might not be a popular opinion with our audience, but I just don't feel right about it. I think this is the wrong direction for this country to go. And if we attack Mexico next, or Cuba, or take your pick of countries we don't like right now, I think that the end result is not going to be good for the United States in the long run.
I spoke with a lady today who I had just met. She was working with me at the bank, and we got on a really long conversation. And for whatever reason, I always end up talking politics with strangers. I'm not sure why I have the talk politics with me look on my face, but we got to talking about politics, and I think it's because I don't ever disagree with anybody in the extent of like you're wrong, right? Because that's not a productive conversation. But what
Mhm.
she said that I found was profound was it is because of it's because of how America is the reason why we act this way, because we're allowed to do what we want, because this is the country of the free. We're allowed to argue with each other. We're allowed to fight. We're really allowed to break the law. We can get in trouble, we can get in trouble for it. But that core thought of like entitlement encompassed in a military right, and then a president who has really done a not good job of really giving America this narrative of patriotism. That's the word I'm looking for. And it's like roll over. That's the narrative, right? There's this rollover thing. And you're right. That is the polar opposite. And man, the White House changes these guys, right? It changes them. And or this is how it was all along. The agendas start to come out. There's also a pattern of behavior with that, I'm sure, where
Mhm.
it's like the kid at the freaking the class president that says he's going to put a vending machine in every classroom, and then he gets elected and he never does it. Like, and the sequence of events causes frustration too, because the fundamental truth of the American people was from our president's mouth that these files were going to be released without a shadow of a doubt, and everybody who was on those files that did wrong were going to be put to justice. And somebody said, "Hey, motherfucker, hey, silly guy, your name's on this stuff too."
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, all right, let's talk about Russia. Let's talk about Russia. Let's talk about what's going on over there with him in Ukraine, and let's get Zelensky back in the office for a little bit and talk about how unproductive those conversations were." Another narration of Fox, and I'm with you on both sides. I'm with you on both sides, because I'm not going to say the word clowns, but man, do they really do a good job with dressing this stuff up, or at least the Iron Curtain is really strong, because there are people that are obviously polarized in left or right, which is why we have these parties to begin with. Um, but that level of patriot, right, that goes into this whole being the world's police, I think there's that core entitlement with that. And I think that, that also stems from like this whole the Boston Tea Party. Dude, like I'm going back a ways here, but just that
Hmm.
overall kind of like old dog, like that young dog fight. That young dog fight. We're one of the youngest countries, out of all of these guys. We don't really have, when you think about it, our world, this country specifically is just a country full of immigrants. And that's where I have this whole, that's where I break a bit. Like, and I want to jump on the other side of where you're at too, because this United States of America is nothing but immigrants. It's just period. You can say, oh, there's more white people than these people or whatever, but you know what? If we would just stop being ignorant for a moment and stop calling white people and say there's actually Polish people, there's Irish people, there's Swedish people, like what they do over in the UK, because that stuff is different. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm sure that they say that too
Hmm.
because it's become this universal thing, but that's just the ignorance that we have as a whole. And like it's all language, right? So, but I think that that's just some of my thought of the United States as a whole, and the personality of the United States of being like this younger kid. Like, I wouldn't say younger kid, but maybe he's like in his freaking, or he's 250 years old. He's
Yeah,
250 years old, but a young 250 years old, right? But
it's a
yeah,
teenager
yeah,
for countries. Yeah,
yeah. Think about dog ears and stuff. But that's my thought on that. I mean, what's your take?
yeah, I can definitely see that as definitely a contributing factor. Also, there's a desire to save what we have. There's a real desire to not let the ship sink, if that makes sense. And I think that Venezuela is the country with the largest oil reserves, the largest proven oil reserves in the
Hmm.
world.
Yeah.
They don't take a lot of it up out of the ground, and that's where Trump was talking about sending American oil companies in to do that.
Mm.
But they have more oil than anybody else. It's also heavy crude, which is more difficult to refine. But Valero, right here in the state of Texas, does that. They can refine heavy crude. They also produce diesel. And so the infrastructure is really there. And the shipping lane from Venezuela to the United States is a pretty straight shot, and not really, doesn't really cover much ground other than, the Gulf of Mexico and then maybe a little bit of the Atlantic Ocean. But it's it doesn't go past Iran or China or any of these other countries that we might have problems with in the future. So I think strategically, the whole thing makes a lot of sense. What it doesn't make sense to me is principally it doesn't make sense, and the way that it was sold to us to me doesn't make sense. So if if this is a resource grab, if this is what we need to do to survive as a country, why are we being told that it has to do with drugs? And if it really does have to do with drugs, then why are we talking about going in there to take oil? So,
Right,
I,
right. Be straight
I
on both sides, just say it for what it is. And that's the whole round answers that we get all the time with these guys. Because, yeah, was there, a guy in there that wasn't that great? Yeah. Uh, are there resources in there that, could be beneficial to us as well? Yeah. So, okay, we catch a bad guy and we get some oil. You know what? Be transparent like that. And you know what? That might hurt a little bit, but I'd rather you be honest with me, more honest with me like that than me just conspire, with my friends and think, when in reality they're probably sitting there like, yeah, that's exactly what's going on. But you guys can't handle the truth. It's like, but you have conditioned us to not handle the truth. You have conditioned us to believe that there is a liar. You that
mm,
there's always something else to believe. And that's the break in the language right there. We just more truth. Like, if people were just more like, hey, I don't really like that you did that, and that bothered me a little bit. Instead of saying, "Hey, dude, you're a F and P. Don't ever talk to me again." Like you see, like one can be solved, and the other one you got to jump through a whole nother hoop. Like, why did you call me that? Like, if you felt this way, if you were just sad or upset, about X, Y, and Z, then why did I get called this? Because that's more personal now. So now I'm thinking that it's deeper than just that, right? Like that's just
Hmm.
this human mind and the conditioning, but we've been conditioned to believe that there's a liar for sure, and it's insanity, and that goes right back to episode one.
Yeah. And it's great that you mentioned episode one again because that's another big thing that happened this week. I don't know if you saw, but the United States government, the White House, released a new food pyramid. So
Kid.
we basically have had the same food pyramid. I don't think it's changed at all since the 90s. And
Hmm.
and then before that they had basically something very similar, but it's always had the grains across the bottom, the big part of the pyramid.
Yes. Yep. Your carbs, all that jazz. Hmm.
So what they did was they've now flipped the pyramid upside down. The grains are still on the bottom, but they're the small part of the pyramid, and the top big base of the pyramid is all your meats and fats and fruits and vegetables. So all the whole foods are up at the top, and it even was labeled "Eat Real Food." As they released it, it's it's right in line with the stuff that we've been saying the entire time, that the food's broken,
Yeah.
and the government is now changing their messaging on it, and it's now concerned people because they're saying, well, it either confuses people or it diminishes the previous recommendations. And I think the previous recommendations absolutely should be diminished. I think you need to come out and just say, yeah, we've been lying this whole time. There was studies done in the 1950s, 1960s, and 70s that were funded by big food, sugar companies, you know, the big companies. They basically wanted to get in bed with the American Heart Association and a lot of these other names that we know and trust, and put out studies that said, animal fats are what's bad for you. You can't have too much fat. That's what the, low fat craze and fad came from. And when you take fat out of food, you have to replace it with something, and they replaced it with carbs and sugar for the most part. And then where they had to replace animal fats with other fats, they used seed oils and other plant-based oils, which we've now seen the high intake in sugar, the seed oils, the margarines and trans fats and things like that. They all cause heart disease. They cause people to become obese. They cause diabetes. They cause heart disease. We it's crazy, all the stuff, and the stuff you can still go and buy in the stores. It's kind of insane to me, but at least this week the messaging has started to change, and we've been talking about on this podcast people needing to wake up. And definitely the government is not the answer, but at least I think maybe more people can start to wake up and take take sovereignty over their own health, and lives. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's that shock, the shock at the end where you say, "Well, wait a minute, hold on." And we've seen this in different ways where they'll say one time, certain this chocolate's not good for you, and or like coffee, or then it's like a glass of wine or red wine in the morning and all this stuff. And man, when you think about people back in these days that really didn't have this modern medicine and really had to rely on the land and get to know the land, and look at these herbs and see them for what they were. Like these things have lasted a long time, and it's now being pushed synthetically for profit and not the health factor to then chain another event, right? Because the pharma wins at the end. It's an iron triangle. It's not just big pharma. It's an iron that curtain, right?
mhm.
But yeah, just going back to what you said, the sovereignty of people just knowing that they again we are America, and these things are happening because we are America, because we're allowed, because we're allowed to trip. We are allowed to, and Dave Chappelle is allowed to say the things that he says, which is also been a controversial thing, which I also think would be a good thing to maybe we can throw this in there here real quick too, because he had a the unstoppable act. I'm not going to say the actual part of it that was in there, but he had brought up a lot of different things, and it really tested the just kind of going along the lines of what we're talking about here with the overall principles of how it's safer to say things in other places, whereas over here you say certain things and you're likely to get the buzzer, get the no detention slip. It's just end of the school year type of deal, and that in itself, that free thought, and that's the fear that they're putting in there. It's like, yeah, you do, but here's the repercussions. There shouldn't be fear in being able to speak freely,
Yeah,
and that's
man.
that. Go ahead.
No, you're just gonna say that hits the nail on the head with a lot of just what I've even experienced in my own life. The conversation we're having right now is not a conversation that I can have with my family or most of my friends. It's
Yeah,
definitely not a conversation I can have at work. You know, they're being called crazy is not even just the gist of it. I mean, I've had family members tell me, "Look, I just don't want to hear it. Don't talk about that." You know, they
right,
get so uncomfortable. They don't want to hear the truth. You know what I'm saying? It's painful for them to hear the truth.
right. And maybe it's there's a fear in them of just being like, listen, I know that there's some other stuff going around, but if you dig too deep, I'm letting you know right now that it's not going to be pretty for you on the other side. It's like knew a guy named Tyler one time who dug too deep and had such and such boys knocking at his door and never saw him again. It's just those old things, and I don't feel like that holds value as much as the truth does, obviously.
Hmm.
And now looking at this food pyramid, it's a duh thing. It makes sense. You and I, and you more than myself, because I've definitely been more in a the and you have fasted as well, but you put emphasis on the meat, the potatoes. You're very much like grass fed and like just good meats, right?
Hmm.
Because that stuff does make sense, and we do need to eat more meats. It is good for us, and it wasn't good for us because the things that we were putting into these animals weren't good. If a chicken is eating another chicken and we're eating their eggs,
Mm.
then you know what I mean. Hold on. Or if they're eating this soy stuff, dude, I was just looking on one of my beard washes and I kind of don't want to use it anymore because it's got soybean oil in it.
Yeah, it's crazy how much stuff. Man, soybean oil is in everything, and
Really, dude.
that's the single most reason. One of the foods that I always remember loving the most, and I'd put it on everything, and I just don't eat anymore is mayonnaise. I wish I could, but it's just something that I don't really want to interact with. And I know there's other ways it can be made, but they aren't readily available in stores. Here's the scary thing: you go and you try and be healthy, and you find yourself a nice mayonnaise with avocado oil or olive oil. Sometimes you can go and find the different mayonnaise with olive oil on the right on the label. You look on the back, and the number one ingredient might be olive oil, but it probably also has canola oil, soybean oil, or something along those lines. Soybean oil is normally the number one ingredient in mayonnaise normally, and
Yeah,
yeah, it's gross.
it's rough. And I'm so glad that you brought that up. I'm actually walking away a little bit, ladies and gentlemen, a little because I want to point this out for those that are in search of some some good uh, some good stuff here, and maybe hopefully Dunamis can give me the thumbs up for this.
Okay.
So I've got it. I've got what's called a Primal Kitchen mayo, real mayonnaise made with avocado oil. You go on the back. The ingredients entail avocado oil, organic vinegar, organic eggs, organic egg yolks, salt, rosemary extract, mustard seed extract.
Oh, beautiful. That sounds amazing, man. That's got to be really good mayo.
It's delicious, man, and I've made it with tunas. It says on the side here, and you know, like you said, there's just certain words too that might actually be what it says, but no soy or canola, sugar free.
There you go, man. That's I'm gonna have to. You're gonna have to send me a link, or I have to find out where I can get that stuff. Because I came across a recipe to make mayo using bacon grease,
Yes,
and
dude.
that's how they used to make mayo, I think. And so that's I just we eat all kinds of bacon. I'll save me some bacon grease and cook up, make some mayo.
It's like two egg yolks. It's two egg yolks, salt, pepper, a little bit of olive oil, and there might be another ingredient in there, and you know you can kind of dress it up a little bit of lemon juice as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, so yeah, just a couple egg yolks, man. But that bacon grease, man, just makes it rich, and that's just those healthy fats, right? That's the stuff that's actually going to break down more natural in your body, and that's
Yeah.
thing that people miss. The things that break down naturally in your body that give you those nutrients, where it make your insides go like the Pillsbury Doughboy when you poke his belly. You know, you gotta treat your body like a temple, man. And I'm glad. I'll say this in a positive way, just to kind of look forward to things. I'm glad that is just some realization. I'm glad that there is this awareness, um, and not even applaud to the government for being like, "Hey, we lied to you," but just us being like, "This is a victory for us," of being like, "I knew it," like this is a "I knew it" moment. But we got to be careful though, because there's a reason why this happened, So this could also be a ploy where now they're going to start making these 3D meats, and they're going to start pumping that into us, and now we're like cancer rates are going up higher now, and it was like, oh yeah, eat more meats and eat like, be careful, y'all.
There is a real danger there, and it's because all of this plays in with principles. I'm going to pull on a thread just a little bit because
Yeah,
yeah, if
dude.
one of the things that principally I don't want to do is eat bugs, and
Yeah.
the World Economic Forum and those elites there would be super happy if they could get the world to start eating crickets and things like that. But I do think that there's a danger of at least the people that are really in charge thinking that we won't be able to produce enough meat to feed everybody. And so, yes, that they're working on these lab grown meats. Bill Gates has been behind a lot of this stuff for 3D printed lab grown meat, or what they do is they'll take a part of a chicken breast or whatever it is and find a way to replicate it either with stem cells or some other thing so that they get this sort of protein piece of an animal to start replicating like cancer, you know, and then they're going to feed that to people. The whole thing is really kind of gross to me, but how can you avoid that? How can I'm going to be on land here soon, hopefully, and I have some ideas, but even if you don't, one of the things that I think is a feasible thing to think about is raising rabbits. And if you just follow me for a second,
Okay.
you you can have with really relatively few rabbits. They procreate, of course, and they'll have kits of a kit is like a litter for rabbits, and the typical kit might have 6, 8, 10 rabbits in it, and these rabbits, over the first, I think it's about 16 weeks of their life, will grow very rapidly to about 3 pounds each, and fully dressed, that's probably about 2 pounds of meat that you can eat.
Mm.
But you know the
Lean meat.
with yeah, with just it is very lean meat, and so you do want to add butter or other healthy fats to balance that out. But in terms of the reason I'm bringing all of this up is because I consume a lot of meat, and principally, I don't want that animal to suffer. And because I have no control over how a cow or a chicken is treated prior to me picking up a steak or eggs at the grocery store, this is one of the biggest driving factors behind me wanting to raise animals myself. If I raise a rabbit, I can take care of it. I can treat it as best as I possibly can and give it a happy life. And when it comes time to dispatch that rabbit with a sharp knife, I can do that quickly and as humanely as possible. And then I'm taking the full responsibility on myself for how that animal has lived and died, right? I know that might be more than a lot of people want to take on in terms of responsibility, but that is where my principles pushed me, was in this direction. And if nothing else, the way food is in this country, I think we had even said here on a previous episode, you can start by just growing a tomato plant, I mean, not everybody's going to have the stomach to raise animals and slaughter them. That's not exactly everybody's cup of tea. So there's definitely other. I mean, you can plant a fruit tree, you can have a garden. There's chickens are a great way to get eggs and animal protein every day without really harming anything. I just want to say there's many ways that we can be involved in the production of our own food, whatever kind of food that is. And if you eat a lot of meat and you don't feel like you can be involved in the process, you can at least maybe get to know some people that do. So, somebody might really love to eat steaks. They don't want to go through the process of raising cattle or doing any of that kind of stuff. You can support local farmers and at least be a little bit more educated on how those animals are raised and how they're cared for. We as Americans get to vote with our dollars. Every time we go to the grocery store, every time we go and spend our money anywhere, we're basically voting with our money. And as long as we continue to just go and buy foods from, the Tyson Foods, the Cargill, the different, the big slaughterhouses in America, these four companies controlled 90% of the meat supply in the United States, from what I understand. So you might even go to the store and see something that you think is not one of those big four companies and buy it, and it might be owned by that company. They've purchased a lot of brands. There's hundreds of brands in every grocery store, and most of those brands have four companies behind them.
Wow. Surprise, surprise, right?
It's where the love of money is the root of all evil, and it really is the misaligned incentives, I think, in the food industry. Big food, you mentioned big pharma. The fact that people are incentivized by money to cut corners, to run their businesses in certain ways that harm the public. We want to raise the alarm. We've been doing it since episode 1. The food is bad. And if the food is bad, then our health is going to be bad. And if our health is bad, then we have to get on the pharmaceuticals. But we really don't. I mean, there's alternatives to all of this. We haven't really talked about fasting all that much on this podcast, but I'm glad that you brought it up, because the body will eat its own damaged cells the longer you fast. You literally make yourself younger by fasting.
Yeah, I agree with you. And as you guys very well know, I'm an advocate of that. And for me, it's that and everything in between, and regulating your nervous system. And I think you just literally see things different. You just you're breaking it down, kind of like your body's breaking it down, and I feel like you're able to see it clearer. Whatever it is, you're able to see it clear. So I mean, they speak about that in the Bible too, don't they,
Yeah.
Douglas?
Yeah, there's I was just thinking about that. The demons that cannot be cast out except through prayer and fasting. And, fasting is like gasoline for your prayers, from what I understand. I need to do more of it. I It's strange because we go through seasons in our life too, and I might be in a different season right now. There's times where we had an episode here a couple weeks ago that was about surviving, and I'm still a little bit in that mode, but I'm transitioning out of it. Fasting is a good thing. I think I need to start adding that to my health repertoire. I just recently started. I've been eating a lot of papaya seeds with honey
Yeah,
and pomegranate seeds,
papaya seeds are
and
helps get the parasites out of you.
exactly. So I was wanting to make. I was feeling sluggish and a little run down, and just felt like maybe that was something that would help out. And sure enough, yeah. I mean, I got the upset stomach real bad for one day, and then feel a lot better now. Pumpkin seeds, eating raw pumpkin seeds too,
Hmm.
and want to get a hold of some ivermectin and fenbendazole here at some point in the future. That's anti-parasitic as well.
Yeah.
I, man, we really talked the principles. I wasn't sure we were going to get all the way around to food and stuff, but it really does. It's something that we believe very strongly about. I think is really what the principles are.
It always goes back to the soil, enriching the soil. And we've seen that again from episode one when we talk about monoculturing and just manipulating the land for it to be one way when the land was meant to be everything.
Hmm.
And regenerative farming, again, is just a natural way for us to let nature take its course, as they say. And that is much more than just, as it be. I mean, you know what I'm saying. I'm not too esoteric, but just let nature take its course, and know the animals that are there. And you build that cycle based off of how much property you have. I think that if we stopped with the competition, and I know this sounds very communist of me, and I'm these narratives that we push again, like these terms of like, oh, if you think like this, then that's this, and you just want to like no, like there's ways for people to benefit off of each other and still wealthy be wealthy,
Hmm.
but like we need to read it like when you really define what wealthy really is, it's not this capitalist world that we live in. Like we live in this capitalist society, and that's why the money being the root of all evil. Money wasn't meant to be bad. You know what I mean? Like I don't like me having to build. Like I don't want to think that for us to make $1 million, we have to do something or sacrifice a lamb, to get there, or have 1,000 bottles of baby oil. You know what I mean? Like I want us to just be able to, off of our hard work alone, and just we have everything in abundance, and wealth is one of those things. And we know what we're meant to do with this stuff. It's not taking away from anybody at all. It's just to build the generations. I was talking with one of my guys in the morning. We've been having some chats in like the 6 a.m. mark, and just talking about what I want. Just all of my relatives and my family, just people that just have that love, and we've all just reciprocated that over time and represent longevity to when we're long gone, to just be able to have a piece of property every time, just like all of these names, you know what I mean? Like how many of these houses and these land marks have been passed down through generations and generations, and big companies and whatnot, like these 5-year olds that are billionaires and they don't even realize it, they don't even know, they're just born into it, and we need that mentality for all of us to be able to to just grow, and that whole hindering thing and the confusion and all of that, like someone's going to have to give me the why on that. Why is it I, I think it's rhetorical. Why is it more profitable to confuse Americans versus everyone having an equal opportunity to achieve something, and this is supposed to be the American dream, because that's also a lie.
Yeah, yeah. I definitely see that. And you have the on the one side you have the desire to have a free market, a free system. If capitalist, that's fine, but one where the rules are equal and even for everyone. And that would be wonderful. That would, if that existed, what we live in instead is not even really capitalist as much as it's what they call crony capitalism. It's the idea that, yeah, you can go out and make all the money you want, But certain people, when they go out to make money and they fail, the government's going to swoop in and take care of them anyways. And that right there is
Mm.
what makes it not capitalist anymore. So, and you should have had banks fail in 2008, you know? Instead, we bailed them out. It's not a free and equal system in that situation.
Right. But a crony, I'd never thought of that before. I didn't even, that makes way more sense. A crony capitalism. And because of the tax bracket, right? Because that person benefits them.
Exactly. They get, well, the wealthiest in this country have all the tax loopholes as well. So they don't pay a lot of taxes, but even beyond that, I think what we found and what we're seeing come out in this fraud in Minnesota is the problem was the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations, which is just a fancy word for a company, could be a shell company, but that company is given money by the federal government in a big grant. Let's say they're just given $1 billion. They can now go do things that the government wants them to do, but the government can't do because it would be illegal if the government did it. So instead, it's done by a company, and this
Right.
company is, the brainchild of some legislator in Washington. Probably half of the money is going directly in their pockets. That's basically what runs the country now. And so if you're up there in Washington, D.C., you happen to be a senator, you happen to own 5 or 6 different companies. One of them's a construction company, one of them's, maybe helps to make bullets or something like that for the military, whatever. I mean, the government then gives your companies money to do the work, and you get those contracts because you're right there. It doesn't you don't really have to imagine too much to know. The Pentagon hasn't passed an audit in a very, very long time, and we don't know where our money goes. Our tax money and the money that gets created at the Federal Reserve gets paid out by the government, and it goes into our system. It creates inflation. It's a hidden tax, and more people need to wake up to what's going on. They don't have to tax us. They don't even have to pass or approve anything. They make up the rules. They're above the law, and they create the money out of thin air.
Yeah. They make the law.
Exactly.
Mhm.
But they don't follow it.
Yeah, but they don't follow it. They don't follow it. Absolutely not. Because why would you if you make it?
Exactly.
Man, I'm really that circled into a lot of principalities. That just to let you guys know, that was a little bit more of an impromptu, as you will. I
Mhm.
will admit that. Dunamis and I usually, spend a little time prior, getting the lay of the land, and I think that one eased in pretty nicely, my dude. That was some egg yolk sauce.
Awesome. Yeah. Sometimes I don't know how much of this to talk about on this podcast just because, you know, I don't know if I'm afraid of offending people or whatnot. I shouldn't be. But I just I've thought these things for a long time, and I think that I don't think the answer is Republicans or Democrats. I don't think the answer is politics. I think we're coming to a time in American history where the answer has to come directly from the people, and I'm hoping it's not a revolution because I don't want to see civil war. I don't want to see a revolution. I don't like war. I think that
Right.
that's bad and harmful and doesn't do anybody any good. I just don't see how we're going to fix or replace this system outside of that. For a time, I thought it was going to be Bitcoin and Cardano and a lot of these other things that were going to come out and replace the existing system. And yet, those things now, we have this Clarity Act being passed, and the people in Washington, D.C., and Wall Street and the banks are now getting their hands in crypto. And it looks like the legislation that's being passed is designed to favor, again, institutions, banks, the big players, Coinbase, and it's going to leave everybody else in the dust. So, you know, it's got me a little bit disillusioned even on crypto and Bitcoin as being the future. I mean, I still believe in all those things. It's just they were originally intended to be a way to opt out of the system, to undo the system. And even voting for Trump for a lot of people was a way to try and undo the system, fix the system, break the system. And right now he is the system, and hopefully he's doing good things. I again, the one thing that I always, he said he would pardon Ross Ulbricht. That happened, and I'm happy for that. But he said that the Epstein files would be released, and that's become a major shit show. So,
yeah, absolutely. It just creates another chain of events.
Yeah. I think we should come back and maybe touch on this topic and other current events as well in next week. But, we're sort of getting close to time now. What do you think we should talk about next week?
Man, I think something practical for sure.
Awesome. Well, let's get that set up, man. And I love these conversations. I think that we probably are gonna, in season 2 here, maybe get a little bit more real with some of that stuff. So I'm looking forward to it, man.
Yeah, same here. The music is translating that demeanor as well. So I can only imagine what that looks like on these other sides. I feel the colors are getting much bolder now.
Definitely. And until next time, man, hey, never give up the fight.
Never give up the fight.
You could try to play, but you're never gonna beat me. Look the other way, what I'm doing ain't easy. Bloody hands stained from the people who deceive me. Muddy hands break through the chains, go free me. Looking for change, looking for pain, pulling a mob, pushing a train. I'll never stop, stick to a lane, pick up the pieces and go rearrange. I'll be the best above all the rest, put me to the test and expect nothing less, your check is I'm chess, what's happening next, yeah. He got the venom, a tangible weapon, no coming in second. This life is a lesson, he got a new engine from pain, it's a blessing. New focus, no guessing, just bold and obsession. All in his possession, you got their attention. I'll leave an impression and take your redemption. Just kill, no discretion, your mind is a weapon. 11-11, it's time for progression, You could try to play, but you're never gonna beat me. Look the other way, what I'm doing ain't easy. Bloody hands stained from the people who deceive me. Muddy hands break through the chains, go free me. People like sheep move feet, hurt it easy. You don't wanna be fast asleep when they scheming. Better stand tall, ready for a fight, believe me. When they try the chains, you can say no, free me. So he's been looking for somebody who could save him, instead of searching inside for what they gave him. A strong will, strong mind causes mayhem. We could change the world, change times, rearrange them. Staying on pace, running the race. Life is a chase, I don't want a place. I wanna be first, work till it hurts. Dehydrated thirst till I'm in a hearse. High ambitions and the right mind can take you so far. It's like you lived a few lifetimes. Take off from a break off from the weak minds. They can stay soft, you can change lives, you create thoughts. Never waste time, you got one shot, you got one life. Better pop off, what do you like? Make a dream job, no 9-5, no mean boss. Just my life and free thoughts. You could try to play, but you're never gonna beat me. Look the other way, what I'm doing ain't easy. Bloody hands stained from the people who deceive me. Muddy hands break through the chains, go free me. People like sheep move feet, hurt it easy. You don't wanna be fast asleep when they scheming. Better stand tall, ready for a fight, believe me. When they try the chains, you can say